Okay, I think another question, and it's funny, I can hear this question from multiple perspectives, but one is definitely someone who's in recovery thinks, okay, I've heard addiction is a 2 to 3, maybe 5-year journey. So how long does it take for me to rewire my brain? By the way, rewire is such a hard word to say. I'm just going to, it's taking so much mental energy. I don't want this to be another math thing, so I'm trying to really work hard.
You can say renew.
Right now, but it's in the stupid question that I wrote. Anyways, what does that timeline for rewiring your brain, what does that actually look like practically? How long would that take?
So I think that timeline came originally from Dr. Patrick Carnes and his his research with sex addicts, and I think that it's accurate when you look at it in that we don't usually struggle with only one addiction. Those of us who have an addictive prone personality, we usually have multiple addictions. And really, when it comes to changing our brain or rewiring our brain, that can actually happen at a rapid rate, but we have to be intentional about it. We have to decide that, okay, these things that I've done for all of these years over and over and over again, I'm going to not only stop doing those, but I'm going to replace those behaviors with something else that is healthy. And what we often see too in this, in recovery is that, okay, maybe I can get sobriety or abstinence from sexually acting out in the first, 2 to 3 months into recovery. But then because my brain wants what it wants and my brain wants what I've conditioned it to do, I'm going to then go to the next thing. The next thing that is what I do when I'm feeling lonely or angry or tired. The next thing that is going to give me that hit of dopamine because that's what our brain wants. And so really, I think that the 3 to 5 year process looks at it and says, of all the different things that you do that create this pattern of behavior, not only in your actions, but in your thoughts and your feelings, we're going to totally transform every single part of who you are in this 3 to 5 year period. I think that that's really what it's looking at. So to say, okay, well, I'm going to be able to abstain from looking at pornography and masturbating, absolutely. That's going to be possible probably within the first couple of months, and then also taking into consideration the fact that relapse happens, and when relapse happens, you don't just start over at, ground zero, but you're learning what you need to do different next time. You're unlearning things that, okay, maybe if I know that this is going to be a trigger for me, I need to have guardrails around that so that then moving forward, that's not going to be an area of relapse for me again. And so it really is looking at not only what am I doing right now, but it's let's look at all of these behaviors, all these patterns that you've established in your lifetime, and we're going to transform and recreate all of those. Yeah. And it takes time.
Yeah, I think this question, like so many that we do, the answer is it depends. It depends a lot on the individual and the work they're doing. So if someone's just saying, well, how long is it going to take for me to have, healthy sex in my marriage? And yet they're still in a binge purge pattern. I mean, maybe it's less often than it used to be, but every month they're still acting out with pornography or engaged in masturbation. Yeah, that's not going back to ground zero, but it is a setback. And your brain is still learning oh, well, that felt really good. And when I had a need, I could meet it by myself, and I don't need my spouse to be into it. And if that's what you're trying to break through, but you're still kind of tiptoeing in and out of that, it's prolonging the process. And I think if we're able to be honest with ourselves about that, it actually can become an aspirational motivation of something we want to, because rather than just avoiding, pornography and masturbation because it's bad, we can be looking to avoid it to say, this is going to make my marriage worse. It will make the sex life I want to have in my relationship more challenging. And so I don't want that to happen. I'm avoiding it because of what I do want, what I am looking for. And if we really are motivated by that, I think it can sometimes accelerate the process. Another thing I would look at is what level of engagement is a person making in emotional connection with their spouse. What level of intimacy is developing? Because like we're saying, if sex with my spouse is just my new quote unquote healthier way to meet my need by not looking at porn or masturbating, but I haven't really changed the nature of our relationship, it may not improve for a while. But if I'm really investing in emotional connection, learning to be real, developing intimacy that's not just physical, but is emotional, mental, spiritual, and then my spouse and I are beginning to engage in sex that is a byproduct of that kind of connection, well, my brain is going to begin to learn from that and learn there's something deeper and more meaningful. And like what I've heard couples talk about and what my wife and I experienced is like, there is something happening here that's not just about technique or, simple physical pleasure. There's like this deeper satisfaction. And we're like, why has this been missing? It's like, well, because we didn't have real, true intimacy. We didn't have emotional connection. We didn't have the right level of trust. And there were, on top of the things I was doing that my wife didn't know about. So it was all of it beginning to work together, I think, that created health and, for myself and others I hear from. So I think if you're looking to ask how long will it take, it's good to know some of it depends on the work you're doing. And what are you doing on your personal sobriety and to learn emotional connection with your spouse and really developing that healthy relationship of trust so that the sex you do have is really completely different than just getting your climax or the pleasure you're seeking.
Yeah. I remember reading a book by Daniel Coyle called The Talent Code, and he says in it, research tells us that you can't unlearn a habit you've created. You have to learn a new one in its place. And Colossians 3 is just what comes to mind for me, that idea of taking off the old and putting on the new. And this is probably a terrible illustration, but I was thinking if you get cold and you put on a garment, but one that's like hurtful to you, you get rashes, it scratches you, it hurts you, it's not good for you, and you take it off, that's great. Like that does half the battle, but you're still cold. You need to put something else on. And that idea, I hate this illustration, but I'm committed at this point.
You're already into it.
I'm already into it, but it's that idea.
Make it work. You got
need
this.
Something, you know what I mean, to cover you. And I think that that's really important. And I would even say practically that I'm in, year 8 and 9, really close to 9 in recovery, but I still am finding ways that I have to rewire my brain sexually. That my expectations that I have, if my wife is not in the mood for it, how I respond so deeply in this like rejection of my identity and who I am, like that is evidence of the porn addiction that I had for years playing out, that still my brain is holding on to certain perspectives. So I think that it doesn't mean that you can't have a healthy sex life and still be moving toward health, but there still may be things, 50 years into recovery that you're still figuring out. So I think keeping that perspective is